Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. This is Britt from Handshake. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to give folks another minute or so to join us, and then we will go ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining us, and hang tight. We'll be kicking off in just a minute. Okay, we'll call that a quorum and go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to today's webinar on reporting updates and best practices. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to talk to you all today. My name is Britt. I'll be emceeing today, and I'll introduce some more panelists in just a minute. Before we do that, I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, I know it's a top question for everyone. We will be recording this session, and we will send it to all registrants via email tomorrow. So if you have to leave early, or if you have a colleague who registered but couldn't attend, they will get a recording via email tomorrow. We'll also make sure it gets posted on our blog. During today's session, you can submit questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll answer some of the questions during the webinar and then address some as well at the end. We've got Q&A section. We've got a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. And when it comes to questions, we really do appreciate your patience. We typically get a ton of them, and we have a whole small contingent of colleagues on the back end to help us answer them. So if we don't get to your question, please don't hesitate to reach out to support or your relationship manager. We are more than happy to help you out, and we will get through as many as we can today. And finally, you're going to see a survey pop up after the webinar ends. Just 3 quick questions, and if you have a second, we would love to get your feedback. So please do stick around. It'll just show up on your screen when we end the webinar. And with that said, let's introduce today's speakers. So again, my name is Britt Gergen. I'm a product marketing manager here at Handshake, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Jake and Tiffany. Jake, do you want to say hi?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Excited for today.
Awesome. And we actually have 2 other guest speakers today, Celia and Thomas. I won't ask them to introduce themselves just yet, but you'll be hearing from them later today. They are representing LMU and ASU, and we're very grateful to have them. So here's our agenda. Today, we're going to start with an overview of our most recent virtual fair updates. And then Tiffany is going to take us through a demonstration of reporting in Handshake as it exists today. After that, we're going to hear from 2 of your peers, Thomas from LMU and Celia from ASU. They are both members of our reporting mini advisory board. So over the last year, they've come together with Handshake and about 20 other school representatives to help shape our roadmap for reporting updates. And they're here today to reflect on their time on the board, share tips on how their teams are using reporting features. So I wanted to say that if you haven't heard about our advisory boards before, they are typically the same size, so about 20 different folks from a wide variety of schools, and they help advise Handshake on a particular area of the product that we're updating. So again, Celia and Thomas both served on the reporting advisory board. We also have advisory boards for things like events and fairs and appointments. If you're interested in participating in a board, we will form more of them in the future. So you'll be able to submit an application to join, and we will make sure that information about that is distributed widely when we form a new board. So just wanted to add that little caveat. After we hear from Thomas and Celia, my colleague Jake will walk us through our next big reporting release, that's scheduled reports. So he'll talk about how scheduled reports will allow you to export data out of Handshake and touch on 2 key use cases that this release will enable. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll wrap up with Q&A. So reminder that you can submit questions throughout today's presentation. Please use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. And we will answer as many as we can during the presentation and then discuss a few verbally at the end. So to kick things off, I have a couple of poll questions that I wanted to throw up. So let's get started. The first poll is, what is your comfort level with reporting in Handshake? Beginner, intermediate, or advanced? We really just want to get a sense of what the audience breakdown looks like. Today's presentation is really great for anyone, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, but again, it just helps to get a sense of who's on the line. So go ahead and vote. We'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. And I've got one more poll for you after this. Okay, that's fabulous. I'm going to close the poll. So here are the results if you're curious. Looks like the majority of folks are beginner, and then we've got a good mix of intermediate and advanced as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, come on now. I'm gonna launch one more poll. So when you think about reporting, which topic is of most interest to you? Which one do you think you need the most help reporting on? We've got a lot of options here, so feel free to take a minute and review them. Again, you don't have to think too hard about this. We just kind of want to get your first thought. Awesome, and we appreciate you sharing all of this. Great, it looks like most people have been able to vote. I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds or so. Okay, perfect. So here are the results. Oops, sorry. Here are the results. The winner by a hair was employers, contacts, and jobs, followed very closely by events and fairs. That's great to know. We'll talk a little bit later today, actually in just a minute, about saved report templates. So that will hopefully give you a great starting point to build reports on these topics. So thanks everyone for sharing. And let's proceed. So we're going to dive into Handshake reporting to start things off. And I want to begin by touching on key reporting updates that have been released in the last few months. So to start, on the main reporting page, you will now see over 50 pre-built report templates that were curated by Handshake. These templates were designed to help you get started when reporting on popular topics in Handshake, like the ones that were just included in that poll. So if you click on one, you'll find yourself with a ready-made report with fields and filters already applied. You can use the template as is. It is a fully functioning and finalized report, or you can use it as a jumping off point to build a more specific report. The goal in either case is to save you time and demystify reporting in Handshake. And it's also important to note that of the 50 reporting templates, 16 are specifically about virtual fairs. Because we knew that reporting on virtual fairs was going to be a new endeavor for a lot of our partners, we really focused on getting a ton of pre-built content out there for you. So you can use those virtual fair reporting templates to get a quick look at total student-employer interactions, no-shows, and more. So highly recommend checking them out. On the topic of demystifying data, we also released definitions for all data fields earlier this year. So when you're building a report, you'll now see a small I that you can hover over to get information about the field. And this helps you better understand the report that you're building and the data that you're including. In addition to taking advantage of Handshake's saved report templates, you can also save your own templates, whether you're building them from scratch or riffing on a Handshake template. When you save a report, you can title it and write a description for the report. You can also save it for yourself or share it with your team. So if you are the reporting admin in your office, saving report templates for your team is a great way to standardize the process of reporting and mitigate errors when other people are running reports. So I just wanted to highlight a quote from Carolyn from Radford University. She shared that her team is already using this approach for saved reports. If she's not available to help her team run a report, saved report templates allow them to pull data knowing that it's accurate. And she shared that it makes her team feel like they don't have to have a degree just to use Handshake Insights. So this is really, again, the goal of introducing saved reports, is to allow you to set a standard for what reporting looks like for your office. And that way everyone can stick to it really easily. So now I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Tiffany to take us through a quick demonstration of Handshake reporting.
Hello, everyone. Britt, can you show slides 9, 10, and 11, and then I'll take it over at 11?
You're right. I was supposed to do that.
That's all right. So I did see some questions coming through from folks about where some of what Britt was showing will be, or where in Handshake is that found. I'll actually show you that in just a moment. But want to highlight for you, there's actually a long and robust, I shouldn't say long, a more robust training available for everyone here on reporting and analytics. We spun this up specifically to highlight everything that Britt just showed, and is really going to provide you with some step-by-step guidance on navigating through the saved reports, but also quick downloads, which I won't get to dive into now on this webinar, but they're actually a very, very swift and accurate way to get data across many of the features in Handshake. So please take some time. I'm hoping after this call, I see a bunch of folks registered for this course in our Handshake Academy, because based on the poll you just did, we have a large amount of folks who are really looking to learn more about our feature. 125 of you classify yourself as beginners, and I really want you to dive into this course and feel like you can utilize the tool. For my advanced folks, I call them my data darlings, who will often hop on some of these and say, hey, I'm looking for more. I want you to know that we have a section in the training that we keep adding more complex example reports in there. They're actually bite-sized. It's one of my favorite parts of the training. What used to be, if we have folks who've been partners with us for a couple of years, they know that our reporting training used to be 3 long hours. These are now bite-sized. Each are under 5 minutes that show you how to build some of these reports. So I cannot share enough to go to the Academy to have a more robust understanding of the analytics tool. So for this demo, I want to make sure that folks understand that we're just highlighting these new features. And again, go back to the course when you're ready to learn more. Next slide, Britt. Primary section to highlight here is that we are looking down on the gray side of your screen, analytics. And this is really the creme de la creme for me, that we're showing you these community, which are our Handshakes templates, and institution, which are ones that you are generating in your system. I will share my screen now and hop into demo to show you this in real time. All right. So again, if I was to start from my home screen, I would navigate down on the left-hand side to analytics, and that will take me to this page. You can see here where I referenced community. These are all of your Handshake approved templates. And if Jake, who you'll be hearing from later, has anything to do with it, our goal is to continue to grow these as we hear feedback from you, and really trying to make everyone's life a little bit easier. Fun fact, interesting to see the poll that you all reported out on what you are looking to report on the most. Right now, as of last week when I was shared these numbers, our most favorited template is the one-on-one and group session activity during virtual fairs, which you see me have starred here. So since that was our most favorited template, that's the one that I will be highlighting for you here. So just want to show you, again, if you, depending on your role in your office, I can show just my favorites so that I can pare down on the ones that I'm looking into most, so you don't have to feel like you're scrolling through myriads and myriads of templates. Going in here, this is going to take some load time, especially for folks who have been in here before. So I have already opened it on another screen. And of course, I didn't refresh before webinar today, so don't mind me, which now means that I'm not going to help reduce the amount of time that I was hoping to during our session. All right, so here is the saved report. what I want you to take away from these reports is that we are trying to minimize time spent on your part. These are reports that are vetted and approved by Handshake, and we know that you all are using them. Do I just have to now utilize what is here? No, in fact, what we're hoping that you go in and do, you see I have expanded the filters section. Let's say it's really important for me to know majors that have attended a particular fair. I can actually now go here in my search bar, hit major, and I am looking for major name. I might want to filter on that because specifically my area of focus might be engineering. For folks who are a little newer to this tool, you will remember, oh, I went major registration name. I bet I hear Jake like talking to me in the back of his mind. Student attending majors, there we go. And actually I want to filter on that. Sorry about that, folks. And you will know that in our dashboard, it is really important that we are spelling things accurately as they're listed, because the actual name matters. It has to be exact. So if you're ever wondering why isn't something coming up correctly, you want to, I tend to wait for this to load. So I'm actually pulling it from the drop down. So maybe because of my purview in my career office, I'm really focused on these two majors that I want to see if they attended. You always want to select run when I add a new field. You're going to see this, I don't know what we call this, a spinning wheel, maybe. I'm dating myself if I told folks about the egg timer that used to rotate on people's screens. And you will see here that now I can see I had one participant of these areas in this group session for this virtual fair. So again, this is kind of, I want you to feel like you can manipulate anything that you are able to filter on or that you're looking for in more detail. But here we're actually able to now look at the one-on-one and group session activity during virtual fairs. So what I might want to do here is go into my options and I can duplicate this. It's now a saved report. And as you can see, Britt just showed us this. I can now share with my school, which then it would show up under my institution section. Or maybe I'm keeping it private because maybe I still have some work to do on it. This is a game changer. Again, I know when we announced this, folks across our network were very giddy because I know people have had, I'm sure if I could see you all, I'd see nodding heads of folks that have Google spreadsheets of links to their many, many reports that now, if I were to go back into my saved reports, I would actually find the one that I just made duplicated there. All right. Again, these, when you're in your office, you want to take some time. The pages do take some time to load. So I won't necessarily go back in there at this time. I'm just going to explore another one of our templates. Let's see, did this load yet? No. Another one of our templates, appointment by staff. Okay. So here it looks like I want to see my appointments by staff. I chose this one because it was a little different than looking from our virtual events and fairs. Obviously, your data will look a lot different. You have lots of staff members meeting with lots of students. This we are surfacing in our demo account as to not show any real data from our institutions. But again, here I can see my appointment count by staff. It looks like Jade is meeting the most of my team, maybe a great time to talk about distribution of time or when her appointments are being held. Again, similarly, what I did in the previous report, I can either scroll down. I don't advise anyone to do that. You can use the search field, but if you're just becoming familiar with it, but I can use a search field to find different sections that I might want to filter on or add to my report. Another addition that I'm sure you all saw is this eye icon. Data definitions, cannot give enough credit to our partner, Nathan at UVA, who helped us to really provide this comprehensive addition to what these names mean. When I think about my 125 folks here who consider themselves beginners, these data definitions have really even helped me get better at reporting, because maybe status means something different to me. Okay, if I go over the eye icon, status on the staff means status of the user who created the note. Are they active or blocked? Great, maybe I want to filter on that. So definitely utilize that to help leverage how you navigate the tool. I want to be mindful of time. So if Britt, if you can take back sharing, I want to go over some quick tips to help folks navigate the tool here. And that would be slide 12. All right, great. Please know that typically this will update overnight is what we say. So if you were running a report right after your event and maybe you were counting at a different way from a different log, and you know that or the end of your appointment day, there you go, and you know that you met with 10 folks and you're running the report and you're not seeing that 10 reflected yet, please know that they tend to reflect overnight, which again, I'm not going into detail now, but a quick download would actually show you the reflective number almost instantly. Learn more about quick downloads in the Handshake Academy because we're not reviewing them in detail on this webinar. I will fast forward down to the end and I can completely circle back again. I want to make sure that you can hear our partners talk about their case studies. For my folks who feel apprehensive about this, I know it might sound cliche, but time and play is the best way to get through this. These are some new features, but these templates were meant to actually reduce some of the fear and apprehension that folks come from building reports. You cannot break this system, I promise you. Poke around in filters, poke around in adding different fields to see if you can run reports on them. And that is going to be absolutely the best way to move from beginner to intermediate and move on through so that I really like the quote that Britt shared before, so that folks don't feel that they have to be experts. In fact, if you leverage the templates, I actually think many of us can complete many of our jobs with just the templates that we've now input into the system. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. So now, as Tiffany mentioned, I am very excited to introduce two members of our reporting advisory board to talk about how their teams are using Handshake's reporting updates. And we're going to start with Celia. Celia, are you still with us?
I am. Hello.
Hi,
can you hear
hello. Yes, you sound
Okay,
fabulous.
perfect.
I'm going to hand it to you so you can get started with your section.
All right. Thank you, Britt. And thank you, everyone. So just to give a little background about me and ASU to kind of set the stage. My name's Celia. I am data analysis specialist at Arizona State University in our centralized career center. We have a large university and some of our academic units have career centers as well. So I work in our centralized location. And I think if any of my colleagues are on here, they might tell me I'm wrong, but I think for the most part, I'm one of the only people whose position in the career centers is devoted specifically to data. So I spend a lot of time in Handshake analytics, as well as helping some of our other career centers build their reports. So we have a lot of data needs within our university. A lot of our academic units love to see how their students are engaging with us. So we've been trying to make data accessible to everybody. So I was able to participate in the advisory board, and just to talk a little bit about that, I loved meeting other people who are using the Handshake reporting tool because I don't, get to do that very often. A lot of people in our university are either working on one other side of Handshake, or they're working in data, but not specifically in Handshake. So that was really nice. And to be able to see some of the reports that people were using, it made me want to be more active in the community, to talk about reporting and to ask those questions to other people and to give feedback about what we're doing, just because I think it's really, really helpful. So I look to do that more in the future. Can we go to the next slide? Perfect. So just one example of a report that we're using is just really simple report, actually, appointments with our career specialists. So I just included some of the filters on there of what we're using in that. So just to make sure that we're only looking at the appointments that actually happened, we have the appointment status marked as completed, one for the appointment date. And then based on some of the specific ways that we record appointments in Handshake, some of the appointment types that we didn't want included. We wanted to just look at appointments where a student is actually meeting with a career specialist, where we also include some of our virtual services in there as well. So we included those, or we disincluded those using one of the filters. And so what we're using this for, we do this with pretty much all of our services right now, is we're building dashboards that make it really easy for our different partners in the colleges to be able to view how their students are interacting with us. So the really nice thing about this is that we have, at this point, we have 14 different colleges. We have a lot of reports to run. And so I'm able to hand this over to one of my student workers using the saved reports. So he's able to update these frequently because it's saved and I've been able to look it over and approve it. We know that everything in there is accurate. And so if we can go to the next slide, this is one of the things that we've been able to build. So this is connecting with some data from our data warehouse, but we could also pull these demographics out of Handshake in the fields. But this just allows us to frequently update and make sure that we're using the correct filters and fields and frequently update how different students from different colleges are interacting with us. And then next slide. So they also asked us to provide some of the tips that we use for end of year reporting. And I really recommend checking out, like Tiffany said, those saved reports that Handshake staff have already built to make sure that you're using the right filters, that you're including everything. Because one thing that I did when I first started was I just started running reports and I didn't realize, for example, that we needed to have a filter for attendees checking into events. I didn't realize that if students didn't actually show up, they would be included. So that was one thing that I was able to use a help article to see some of those specific filters that needed to be included. The other recommendation that I've been doing a lot now that we have saved reports is to save the report when you run it, because I didn't always do that when we had to have links that we needed to go back to. And so this makes it really easy to have that report saved in case any questions come up. If somebody wants to know more details, it's so much easier to not have to go in and recreate the report and make sure that everything is exactly the same to be able to answer some of those questions. The last thing, and I think this was especially helpful when I first started in reporting, was to check on the front end to make sure that the numbers that you're getting are matching. So for example, when I make a new report, I like to compare the numbers from a specific event of how many students checked in the events module to what I'm getting out of the analytics module to make sure that everything matches and that I'm not forgetting any of those major filters. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to put together this mini case study for us. So next, we're going to pass things over to Thomas. Before I do that, though, I wanted to call out, I've seen a lot of great questions coming in via the Q&A panel. Again, we're working through those as quickly as we can, and we'll also be answering some at the end. So if your question hasn't gotten answered yet, fret not. We will continue diligently working away at them. So thanks so much for submitting. That being said, Thomas, are you with us?
I am. Good morning, everybody. So first off, thanks to Handshake for letting me participate in the webinar. I'm really grateful to be able to contribute back to Handshake's user community, which I rely on to get my job done. So thank you. So my name is Thomas Kolsing. I'm an application systems analyst at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. I oversee the technology and data strategy for LMU's career and professional development. My job is effectively to enable the future success of CPD by ensuring that they have the right tools in their toolkit, and then they have the knowledge to use those tools. So being part of the product advisory board for the reporting and analytics tools was incredibly important to me because it allowed me to have the insight into the Handshake product roadmap, which informs our technology strategy decisions and our product acquisitions decisions. So if we're making decisions on what software we would like to purchase in the future, having some insight into the decisions that Handshake is making is really valuable to us. And that's, of course, on top of the fact that we get to contribute our feedback into the product development process at Handshake. We all know that data and analytics and reporting are becoming increasingly important to the outcomes and admissions processes in higher education. Really good evidence of that is that 5 years ago at LMU, they moved the Career and Professional Development Office under the Enrollment Management Office because the data that we're getting out of Handshake is so incredibly important to outcomes and admissions decisions. So it's really important to us to have the visibility into how other institutions' analytics and reporting practices are going. It gives us the opportunity to share knowledge, and it also allows us to benchmark what we're doing against what other institutions are doing. So that's another advantage of being part of the Admittee Advisory Board. But I think the most important aspect of being part of the board is just having the opportunity to network and interact with my counterparts at other institutions in higher education. So that's really valuable to me. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take a little different perspective on the data that Celia presented. And I think this is particularly important at LMU because we have every year, we have different colleges, and the engagement, student engagement with career and professional development varies by college. So this is one of the requests that I get very often is, what is engagement for college? These requests come not only from CPDs, coaches who are responsible for the various colleges at LMU, but it also comes from the deans in those departments as well for their annual reporting. So what I did is I actually tried to construct a report that answered these questions entirely in Handshake so that people wouldn't have to export the data and then manipulate it or transform it in Excel. So what you see on the left side of the screen is the appointments counts by college and month. So I basically took a pivoted the data by college, and it just tabulates the data, the appointment counts by month, and then presents them in a visualization. And that would be one of my recommendations that I'll talk about a little later, is utilizing the visualizations to get a better understanding of how that data looks. And as you can see, if you hover over the points in the data, just like you have in Excel, there is pop-ups that provide more detail or insight into the data points there. The image on the left side is actually another one of my recommendations. So while presenting data for appointments by college and month is useful, higher education really isn't tabulating data by month. They're really tabulating data by term. And that's the answer that they always want. So, okay, great, thank you for telling me month by month, but what about by term and year? So what I did in this report was actually to use the calculations feature, which enables you to calculate based on the time. There's a lot of, you can basically write any calculation you want, and the formula language is similar to what you see in Excel. But I just calculated the term and the year based on the start date and the month there to make it easier for my business users to jump into this report and then understand how that month by month appointment activity translates into terms. And part of the reason this is really important is because while in my role, I'm occasionally giving out reports, but the bigger part of my role is actually to teach CPD coaches and other people at LMU how to use the reporting data by themselves without my interaction. So I'm sort of handing off this responsibility and ensuring they know how to use it themselves. And I think having the term and year in the data itself is very useful. Next slide. So here's my tips for end of year reporting. The Save Reports is a brand new feature, and it's awesome. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly encourage you to do so. Like me, you probably have a spreadsheet or a document someplace with a bunch of links that you created to reports in Handshake. I really encourage you to just migrate all of those links to Save Reports. It's very easy. Just click the link, open it, save it, and then repeat. Go through all your links. I actually did that recently and migrated all of my links into Save Reports in Handshake. Sharing those reports with other people, if you have people that are in excuse me, in your department that are already in Handshake, then of course they can see those links if you make them available to them. I think Tiffany showed the ability to change the access level from private to for your institution. It does still require that anybody who wants to look at that data has access to Handshake and has access to the analytics features. And unfortunately, that's still all or nothing, but hopefully at some point in the future, we'll get more granular access to reporting in Handshake. The URLs are still shareable. They're still secure, so that's still a great way to share it, but I still encourage you to migrate your links to saved reports. I also encourage you to leverage poll learning. What I would suggest is if you're still getting requests for reports, a great way to answer those requests, and this is a shout out to the work that Tiffany has done in Handshake Academy, is to actually answer your requests with a report link in Handshake Analytics, in addition to a link to the Handshake Academy reporting and analytics training. The great part about that training is that, as she pointed out, it's all bite-sized videos. So the person that you're sending this information to can jump in, they can look at a 2-minute video to understand how the tool works, to just drill down to the specific thing that they don't understand, and then work with that link themselves. And if you're like me and you really don't have 2 or 3 minutes to listen to a video, you can even spin it up to two times and listen to Tiffany talk at a super fast rate. So. I also encourage you to start from the shelf. There are tons of really useful, canned reports that are already available in the analytics tool. You can basically open any one of those, click on the options and click duplicate to create a new version of it, edit it, and then save it as your own custom report. Tiffany pointed this out, and my little eye in a circle got converted into a box there, but basically read the pop-up documentation. It's a game changer. One of the things that made the analytics tool in Handshake challenging to use was the huge amount of data that you had available that was being generated by this great tool that we have for career services. When you have that amount of data, it can be really difficult to understand one field from another. Handshake has done the work of adding pop-up documentation to every single one of those fields so that you understand what does it mean when you're asking how many students attended an appointment and what their student status was at the time of the start of appointment. All of that is explained in the pop-up documentation, so I encourage you to use it. The last 2 things I would say are minimize data exports and transformations. I like to call on my old friend Gandalf and quote him saying, keep it in Handshake, keep it safe. This doesn't necessarily apply to all situations. If you are like Celia and you have a data warehouse, that's great. But I saw that a lot of you are self-identifying as beginners in Handshake, so you probably don't have access to a data warehouse. What you can do is use the tools that Handshake has provided in analytics to basically generate reports that don't need to be exported, and you don't need to do any additional transformations or editing in Excel. Try to keep your work inside Excel. That'll keep the data closer to the source. It'll keep it up to date. It'll keep it safer. And my 2 extra credit items here are to utilize the pivots and the visualizations. They make data a lot easier to consume, a lot easier to understand. So it'll make it so that you don't have to export your data into Excel and pivot it. The pivoting works great in the Handshake analytics tool. And I also encourage you to click that calculations button and try out a few calculations. The documentation for calculations is actually available in the calculations tool. So when you're in the Handshake analytics, just click calculations and there will be a little window that pops up, and down in the lower left corner, there's documentation that explains how to use those formulas to do calculations in Handshake's analytics tool. So there it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And just to embellish what you were just talking about, I especially want to double down on visualizations and calculations. The visualizations, you just have to, they are listed right below the filters at the top of your report. So if you expand that section, you can see your data in a bar chart or a scatter plot or whatever other type of visualization might be best suited to the data. And that's automatically generated in Handshake. So it's a great tool to use. And for table calculations, look exactly where Thomas said to find the documentation, or I also just dropped it in the chat. So if you're curious about building custom reporting calculations in Handshake, you can check that article out there as well. Fabulous. All righty. So thank you again, both to Thomas and Celia. And with that being said, I want to run another poll. So let me get that going. We just talked a lot about saved reports. So I wanted to get a sense of whether your teams are using saved reports or whether you might now feel inspired to use saved reports. So this is a quick question. Are you already using them? Were you planning to use them when you're doing end of year reporting? Are you potentially going to think about it now that you've heard some fabulous examples from your peers? Or maybe is it not something that's needed in your office? Wonderful. Thanks everyone for contributing. Again, this is really helpful to get a sense of where everyone's at and how impactful these features have been for your offices. So thank you so much for answering. I'll leave it open for another 10 seconds. All righty. So here's what we got. It looks like the majority of you have used saved reports. That is wonderful. As you continue to use them and integrate them into your workflows, please let us know the wins and new efficiencies that you're uncovering. We want to learn about them so that we can basically brag about you to everybody else and help everyone collectively up their reporting game. And for those of you who are planning to or thinking about it, don't hesitate to reach out to support or your relationship manager. They'll be more than happy to help get you started. Wonderful. Okay. So for our final section today, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jake to talk about our next big reporting update, scheduled reports.
Thanks, Britt. Yeah, really excited to talk through this and want to make sure we leave some time to get to some of the questions and answers later in the session, but really excited for this release. We've talked about this a number of times this past year and excited to get this into folks' hands in the next month or so. So as an overview, if you're not familiar, we are working on a process to allow you to schedule reports on a regular cadence outside of Handshake. So all of the reports that we just talked through, the ability to save, so configure, to modify, to save, to pick the visualization, to pick the fields that are there, the filters that are there. Each one of those reports will be able to be scheduled to be sent outside of Handshake into a third-party destination. So initially there'll be two options. One is to an email, so to your email, and the other is to an SFTP, which is essentially a secure file drop server. So if you're unfamiliar, we can help guide that or talk to your IT department. They should be quite familiar with that technology. Within that, you'll be able to schedule the frequency, so daily, weekly, monthly, et cetera, on specific days like, every Monday or, the first of every month or something like that. The format, so CSV, the image that we were just talking about, JSON, if you're familiar with more of a technical coding syntax, and the destination as we described. Those will then be able to be routed into any of your third-party software. So whether you're using this for individual reporting with stakeholders on campus, or you're looking to integrate with your data warehouse for other visualization tools, or with data that may not be originated in Handshake, this could be a great option. So we'll talk through a couple case studies here about what this may look like. The first is how you may send a report to some of your institutional leadership. There may be folks on campus that you want to be sharing reports with on a regular basis. So how this will work is within the interface that Tiffany just demoed, there'll be a new option called Schedule. Should be fairly straightforward. You click Schedule and you'll see a new pop-up. If we go to the next slide. So that pop-up will allow you to name that schedule. So you could say like monthly appointments report, where this data should go. So in this case, we would schedule it for email. This will arrive at the email that you have configured for your Handshake account. And you can pick PDF, visualization, CSV, or JSON will be another example or another option there. And the timing, as I mentioned, daily, weekly, monthly, and the days of the week that you might want to have it delivered. You'll be able to send a test email, so make sure it looks right, and then hit confirm, right? So that will now be delivered to your inbox on that regular schedule. Let's say it's every Monday morning at 8 a.m. It'll arrive every Monday morning at 8 a.m. with that new data set. On the initial launch, we are not including the ability to add other email addresses to send it to folks outside of yourself. And that's simply a privacy and security risk that we want to make sure that we have the right permissions in place so that you're not scheduling private PII student data outside that you shouldn't be. So that may be an update we add in the future, but you can also schedule like automatic forwarding or anything from your email address if you do want to operationalize that email delivery a little bit more. So keep an eye out on that. The second example that we can talk through is, let's say you have a Salesforce instance on campus, and let's say that you want to upload, in the example listed here, monthly hiring update. So you want to push any outcome data on an individual student up to Salesforce, right? Student maybe got an internship, they got a job, and you want to push that information up. Same process. You would go to that report, click schedule. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see a couple of new options here. So you'll pick SFTP. It's a little small on the slide, my apologies, but you would enter your SFTP address. Your IT department should be able to have, generate this quite easily, as well as the credentials, the password to be able to get into that SFTP. This function will only be available for folks with a new permission that we will be adding for the sake of this feature. So because, again, there is a security risk of being able to export data on a regular basis, admins will be able to configure only certain users to be able to have this functionality. So not necessarily everyone on campus with analytics permissions will get this option. That will be pushed to that SFTP folder on whatever cadence you specify. And from there, if we go to the next slide, you can configure that data as it's dropped. Let's say it's dropped in as a CSV into that SFTP. You can then work with your IT team to configure an import of that CSV into whatever third-party database you're looking for. So whether it's Salesforce or your data warehouse, or even a Tableau instance or Power BI instance or something like that, you can push that data up on a regular basis. As a reminder, the intent is that there should be a setup process, and then it should just happen magically. So Handshake will be able to export this data, let's say it's daily, every night. You can configure that nightly data to be extracted from the SFTP and pushed into whatever third-party service. So your staff automatically can just log into Salesforce and see that data. So this is more the setup process as opposed to the daily process. There are tools like Data Loader IO, that is actually a Salesforce-owned product, specifically in this use case, where you can configure those fields through a really easy UI. So mapping first name to first name, zip code to zip code, just to make sure all the fields are aligned, and then you're off to the races. We know, as a bit of a higher order point on this, we know that there's a ton of different systems that our partners are looking to integrate with. And so instead of releasing kind of drip, drip, drip of like a Salesforce integration, Banner integration, a Canvas integration, we decided to go a little bit more generic so that your IT teams can pull that data into those third-party services in a more generic fashion. And we think this will be able to assist most use cases as opposed to a more narrow outcome. So yeah, so those are the two primary functions. I'm really excited to see how folks on this call use some of these tools in creative ways. And if you do have some creative uses, we'd love to hear about it, because we think others can benefit from hearing as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jake. And just to kind of put a nice little cherry on top of this presentation, we are going to start accepting folks who are interested in beta testing scheduled reports. So when you get your follow-up email for today's webinar, which will come tomorrow, in addition to including a recording and some other resources, there is going to be a form you can fill out to join the beta. Right now, we're targeting early December, likely the week of December 7th. So if you fill out that form, we'll send you an email when Scheduled Reports is ready, and it will be turned on in your account so that you can start trying it out. So again, be on the lookout for the form to join the beta in tomorrow's follow-up email. We'll also share it elsewhere if you happen to miss that email, but would love to have you all as beta testers if you are interested. So that being said, let's do our final poll of the day. And this one, as you might expect, is about scheduled reports. So here we go. Having just heard about 2 different use cases for scheduled reports, do you anticipate your team is going to use this new feature? We've got a couple of options here. So again, we talked about exporting data to another system. We talked about sending data to external stakeholders via email. You might also be interested in both of those use cases. And then the final 2 are that you're not planning to because you don't really have a use case for it, or that it's not going to meet the needs that you have for exporting data. So thank you again, everyone, for filling out this poll. This is, again, really helpful to understand the different use cases that folks are looking to support with scheduled reports. And I just have to say, again, we are really excited about this update. This has been one that's been a long time coming, and we know it's really going to enable some cool things for you all. Perfect. So I'm going to leave that open for another 10 seconds, and then we will move on to answering some of your questions. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Here are the answers if you're interested. So it looks like the highest number of people said that they were going to use scheduled reports both to send data to an external system and also to external stakeholders. So that's wonderful to see. All right, with that said, let's dive into Q&A. So again, if you were hanging on to your question, please feel free to jump into the Q&A panel in Zoom and submit it. And I'm going to start reading through a couple of them here. So Celia and Thomas, we actually had a couple of questions for the 2 of you. Celia, I'm going to start with you. You shared that wonderful dashboard that ASU has. And we had a question come in. Do you have a data website where you showcase this information to employers or students and or staff?
Yes, so we have an analytics portal just through ASU where we can showcase mostly Tableau dashboards, which is what we're using. And this allows us, we have a lot of stakeholders who do not have Handshake accounts, or at least staff accounts. So this allows us to make it available to them without them having to go through the process of making a Handshake account. So that's the main reason why we're exporting it and putting it in a different program to make it accessible to them.
Awesome. And that actually answered another question. Folks wanted to know if you were using Tableau. So good to know there.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. I skipped that part. We are using Tableau.
We got there in the end. Wonderful. Thomas, a technical question for you about calculations, building calculated fields. So once you create a calculated field, can you refer to it again, or do you have to create it new on each new report? And that's from Christy at Princeton. Hi, Christy.
Yeah, Christy, that was a good question. I did chat a response to it. The calculated fields are sticky. So when you create a calculated field and then save the report, the calculated field stays with that report. You can create multiple calculated fields. I've used calculated fields to convert data and to add up columns, for example. I've also used calculated fields to create deep links to employers, for example. If you have the ID for an employer account in Handshake, you can, and you'd like your users to be able to click on the link to jump right into the employer profile in Handshake, you can create a link using the concat formula. You can't directly click on it, but you can highlight it and then go to it in Chrome. That's been very useful. I really encourage everybody to use the calculated fields because they do stay with the saved reports and they make them a lot more usable.
Awesome. Great. So next question. This is from Molly. If you were pulling data with a date range, how does this work with scheduled reports? Jake, I think I'm going to throw this one to you. So if we're saying like, if you have a filter at the top of your report that is looking at a certain date range, how will that translate into a scheduled report that you're maybe running weekly?
Yeah, wonderful. And I was actually just typing up the response. So within the filtering options, if you pick date range, let's say you're looking at appointments, for example, and you want to look at the created at date for an appointment. So within filters, there's two types of options. One is fixed and the other is relative. So fixed filter would say something like, show me appointments between January 1st and January 31st, right? You could also do a relative filter where you say something like, show me appointments last month, so that if you have a monthly report, each successive report will show the previous month. So the May report will show the April data, et cetera. Or you could have it fixed if for some reason you want to have a time bound that doesn't change. So both are options. We just recommend you use the relative filters if you want that data to be refreshed and updated with some time bound associated.
Excellent. Awesome. So Celia, I have another question for you. This person asked, for ASU, are you manually pulling the Handshake data to create the dashboard? Or are you pulling via the API somehow? And I know you and I discussed how scheduled reports would probably actually allow you to automate some of this, but do you want to talk about how you are keeping your data warehouse updated right now?
Sure. So we're actually not putting it in our data warehouse yet. We're combining it with some data warehouse data. So we are using the saved reports, which has been extremely helpful because it just allows me to put reports out for my student worker to update that. And that's what he's doing every week. So once we build it once, then it can be quickly updated. But we are looking for the scheduled reports to help with that and to automate it.
Excellent. Cool. Okay, Jake, I have another question for you. Are there any plans for Handshake to create standard reports for federal reporting, i.e. job location and development? And there's a very long acronym here, JLD-FISAP. Jake, I wonder if you could kind of speak to our philosophy for how data fields are created in Handshake and also how we expose them in response to that question.
Yeah, so the short answer is there's no immediate plans to be building those sort of federally compliant, or in a lot of cases we see like state compliance standards out of the box. If those fields are available, a lot of times what that ends up being is that certain configurations of the data schema just doesn't align, in which case we're jumping through a number of hoops. If there are specific standards that you're interested in mapping to, we'd love to chat about it. And we could actually help build those templates in concert with you. So if the JLD data is available and you want to try and take a stab at it, we can then bring that out to the rest of the group. So
awesome. Thank you, Jake. Here's another technical question, but a good one for from like a system cleanliness perspective. Can we remove archived or disabled staff permanently and have their items moved to someone else to make this issue not a problem for staff who aren't familiar with reporting? This is from Mallory. And Mallory, I think what you're asking here is like, if you had a staff member save a report and then they move on to another role and they are no longer active in Handshake, can we transfer ownership? If I botched that, feel free to jump into the chat and give some clarification, but I think that is it's a good question if that's what you were asking. Jake, I don't think we have a way to reassign the report right now. Likely the best way to do it would be to have someone make a copy of that report before the person leaves, and then have the person who's leaving delete the saved report template. Does that sound right?
Yeah, so there are a couple pieces here. One is that the user will likely not be deleted, they'll just be disabled. So the report shouldn't disappear, and it won't be deleted, so you don't have to worry about that. If there is some really hard requirement and you're really stuck, our support team can help transfer that ownership. Although it's a little bit of work. So we recommend essentially just, as Britt said, duplicate that report. It should retain all the same metadata. And now you have a copy of it that you own and can manipulate yourself. So.
Awesome. Well, folks, that is time. We're at the top of the hour. So again, thank you everyone so much for attending. Thank you again to my co-presenters, especially Celia and Thomas. Please stick around for that quick poll, just 3 questions we would love to get your responses to. Hope you found today's session really helpful, and we'll see you again at another webinar soon. Have a great one.